You're listening to the Mile You're In podcast. Everything running related from 100 meters to 100 miles. And now, here's your host, Phil Patterson Jr.
What's going on, everybody? You know who this is. This is the Mile You're In podcast. And I have another special guest on the show today. We're going to be talking about her journey through the Olympic trials, personal life, COVID, like everything. I mean, I think we all can relate to something in this one way or another. So I'm proud to introduce, and I always struggle, even if I don't say it out loud, because the name sounds very similar to another name. But welcome to the show, Mariah Kelly.
Thank you for having me. I think I know what other name you're referring to. I get that a lot.
Yeah, it's like I'll read it as Mariah Kelly, but in my head I'm saying Mariah Carey, and I'm like, no, that's not the right name. So,
you know what? Mariah Kelly always is gonna get the number one spot on Google. So
for sure.
I'm never gonna rank above.
So for any of you that do listen to the show and read the interviews and features I do on the website, you probably recognize the name. But if not, I still want Mariah to introduce herself, a little bit about herself to you guys. So Mariah, just whatever you want to throw out there, a little introduction about who you are and I don't know, whatever you want to say.
Great. I'd love to give myself a little pump up. So yeah, my name is Mariah Kelly. I run the 1500 for Canada, and I represent New Balance. I went to Baylor University, was a NCAA All-American, Big 12 champion, school record holder, and happened to be the first person out of Olympic selection in 2021 and named as an alternate for the 2021 Olympic team.
Yeah, that is, it's still confusing. Like even when I was watching the Olympics and they were calling them the 2020 Olympics, I'm like, this is like, I don't know. I feel like I'm watching the wrong Olympics.
It was weird. Like, I didn't even know how to say it. You know what I mean? Like, I just pick a year, man.
Yeah, because even like all the logos, like everything was 2020. So it was just like I feel like anyone who like in the future looks back at these, they're gonna think it took place in 2020, but it didn't.
Yeah, I know. Well, and some people were like writing 2020, but then like put NE on the end. So it was like, okay.
So I'm actually glad you mentioned that first about the Olympic selection, because this is something I learned this year. Like I've followed the sport for probably since like I started running back in 2013, but I never like really dug into the whole Olympic selection process. And it seems like, because it also happened with somebody else that I've become friends with through the site and everything, that the selection for some countries, like the process is different than the US. And that was kind of interesting to me, because then it was like, what rules, standards, process, like how does that work? And it may not be the same for every country. So like, what is that like for a Canadian athlete to try to qualify for the Olympics?
Yeah, so each country had an option, I guess, to either, follow the IOC and IAAF selection process, or to choose their own selection process. And so, for example, the United States decided that they were only going to allow those who had the Olympic auto to fall into the pool of selection, whereas many other countries chose to use the Olympic auto as well as the world ranking selection process. And so basically for my event, the Olympic auto was 404.2. And the world ranking was, you had like your top 5 performances got ranked, and then you were given a overall world ranking based on the average of those top 5. And so, in Canada, we had the option to qualify either way. And obviously, we had Gabriella, who's, very highly ranked, and she had the Olympic auto. So she was kind of a shoo-in. And then there was a few other Canadian women who were either close to the auto or they were in the world ranking. And myself and Lucia were in the world ranking. And then we had Natalia Hawthorne, who actually got the Olympic auto late in the season. I think it was like at very end of May, beginning of June. And that's how I got bumped out.
So somebody, if I'm understanding this right, somebody who, let's say, performed better like earlier in the process of that like average that they grab, but starts to maybe not perform well, or maybe has an injury, so they're working their way back, they could get bumped out just because their average wasn't as good as somebody else's?
Yeah, exactly. So the world ranking was like, that selection process was a little bit crazy, especially because of COVID, because we had like April 2020 until December 2020, which was like a complete blackout period where no one was allowed to have any performances. But then they had rules where performances from some championships in 2018, as well as like performances from 2019, still counted in your world ranking, where normally you would only be given like a 12-month period of where your performances would count. So there were literally people ranked in the top 45 in the world in my event that hadn't actually performed once in 2021.
Yeah, that's where I was getting, like, I'm thinking, like, I'm glad you mentioned there was that like time frame, so you kind of have like a lock set of, these amount of weeks, months, or a year. But I just, like, I look at it like, I would personally like the person going into it to be at their best, like in their prime, ready, like, because you might take somebody who has the history, but at that moment they're not performing at that level, and I would feel like you're sending them just to end up like not performing poorly, because you're still going against the best in the world, but you're not. I would think the person who's doing really well right now would represent the country better and have a better chance than somebody who performed better earlier in that selection process timeframe, but right now is kind of struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there were some countries that, sent people who maybe hadn't performed in a long time, but because of their world ranking qualified. But I just want to like clarify that the team that went for Canada, Gabriella, Lucia, and Natalia, that was our best team. Like I did not get slighted in any way. Like those women got their spot fair and square.
Right. Yeah.
So that wasn't the scenario for Canada.
Yeah. That was the thing I'm thinking, is like, how would that work? So I'm glad you cleared that up, because it did make me wonder, like, what athletes right now deserve the spot over somebody who deserved it maybe months ago. So as long as, the athletes themselves that aren't making it feel like it's fair, I feel like, who are we as fans to kind of argue that? But if, because obviously whoever gets picked is not going to say like, oh, I don't deserve this spot. I mean, I could see somebody doing that, but I don't think many people are going to do that unless they just feel like, yeah, I might have earned this spot, but I think so-and-so should go in my place because they would represent us better. Because I feel like, as much of a competition as it is, you guys are still all proud to represent your country. So as a native, as a team, if you feel like for whatever reason somebody else deserves that spot and they're going to represent better, I would think most athletes would say, you know what, let me let you take this opportunity. I guess it's a tough situation when it comes to the Olympics, because it's not that often that you get to go. So
yeah, no, totally. And I definitely think there were probably scenarios where that was like playing out, where someone wasn't necessarily ready to perform, but because of their world ranking, they just got a spot, whereas maybe someone else behind them was ready to perform, but they didn't have a world ranking spot ahead of them. So yeah, it definitely, the world ranking selection process is definitely more gray than the automatic qualifying process. So it does make for things to be a little bit more complicated anyway, especially when it's close.
Yeah, and I think I guess the last point I would make on that is the scenario I think of just sitting here is for the American side of it, the marathon, because our winner for the trials ends up getting pregnant, having a baby, and worked her way back to, you know, be able to run the race and compete, but was nowhere near what she was during trials. And it's just one of those things where I think, like, you know, she earned it and she still went and did her best, but I feel like maybe there was somebody that could have taken her place and did a little bit better. Maybe not. It's, you know, it's one of those things, is you never know. That's the thing about sports. You just show up and give your best, and whatever happens.
Yeah, no, totally. And honestly, like, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I know just from being in the sport that this was true for a lot of people. Like, COVID changed everything. I think everyone was, you know, gearing up and firing on all cylinders for 2020. And then all of a sudden a wrench was thrown into things and it went full stop, and you had to sort of recalibrate your whole plan. And some people did that really, really well. And some people really benefited from the extra time, whereas other people, they didn't, and they had other plans for 2021, and it became difficult to, you know, plan that year as an Olympic year when it was never supposed to be one.
For sure. So keeping on topic with that, when did you decide, like, I know you've been running for a long time, when did you decide to chase the dream to make the Olympic team? Because I know a lot of people, we as athletes, we always say, oh, I'm going to go pro, or I'm going to do this and that. But like, there's always that honesty within yourself. Like, okay, like, I'm good, but I'm not that good. So like, when did you feel like, okay, I'm definitely good enough that I could make it, you know, as long as I do what I need to do and put in the effort?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's so true. Well, I definitely lived in La La Land for the majority of my career, as many of us do. I was 15 years old when I first decided that I wanted to be an Olympian. And I came to that decision because my mom had talked about what a great runner she was. And I just wanted to primarily be better than her. And, you know, I wanted to reach the top level of sport. And so my whole goal was around like getting to that first Olympics that was going to come around, which for me at the time was like 2012, but that was ridiculous. And as a young kid, you don't know how ridiculous that is. And then, you know, when I got to university and realized how out of reach that goal would be as a young person who was nowhere near an Olympic caliber level, I recalibrated the goal, but still like really loved running and wanted to pursue it at the highest level I possibly could. And when I graduated from Baylor, I just didn't really feel done with the sport. I didn't feel like I had reached my full potential. And so I sought out ways for how I could continue post-collegiately. And I wasn't like good enough to, you know, get onto some big contract with a company or anything like that. I was just trying to find like a training group I could join so that I could like push myself to be better. And I really just wanted to like reach my potential. And 2016 was like a goal of mine. But then when I joined the West Hub in Victoria, BC, and I got to train alongside a fellow Canadian Olympian, Hilary Stellingworth, I just realized that, you know, I had a long way to go and I was nowhere near where I needed to be in order to make an Olympic team that year. I was still too young, too underdeveloped. And so although like I went into that whole year thinking like I'm going to go for 2020 or 2016, and if it doesn't happen, I'll probably pursue other things, when I realized how much room there was for growth and how much more I could change about my training and my mental performance that could help me improve as an athlete, is how I decided I would commit to 2020. And so that's when like 2020 became the big goal, and the commitment to that quadrennial became like a real thing.
Okay, so now you mentioned prior how, and I think we all seen it in different ways, but how did the delay to 2021 affect you, like in your attempt to make the team, like the whole selection process? Like what was that like?
Yeah. So, coming off of 2019, like I had a good season. I performed the best I had ever performed at the national championships. And my coach, Heather Henniger, and our assistant coach, Jeff, like they are, geniuses, and they really planned around 2020. And we just like really hit the ground running. Like indoor season was like my best indoor season yet. I was hitting like the fastest marks I had hit, and my world ranking was really good, and things were looking like they were going to be great for me. And then the news of the postponement came, and it was just like full stop. And it was difficult. And at the time, like, we weren't sure if it was going to be like canceled or postponed. We did realize, like, they did announce pretty quickly that it would be a postponement. But I think like just you gear up for 4 years for this like 1 year, and you're in it, and things are like going well, and you're really like ramping up towards this goal that you've been like dreaming about for, for sure the quadrennial, but like for me, like 15 years of my life. And when it just like gets ripped out from under you, you almost have to like figure out how you're going to like press the reset button and get ready for it to be a whole other like year and change from that moment. And I just really think, unfortunately for me, like I didn't do a good job at recalibrating that. I tried my best, but I didn't do as good of a job as I needed to in order to be at my best in 2021. I was really disappointed in the postponement, and I put a lot of that frustration and anger into my training, which led to an injury, which then led to me not being able to do any sort of like time trials or race like scenarios, which I think like it was my first year away from racing in like, I don't know, probably a decade. And I just didn't realize how much a year away from racing would affect my performance the following year.
Yeah. So I guess when you're performing at that level, it's not like, someone like me that just does, I still push myself, but, I'm not competing. I'm not a front of the pack result finisher. Even when I was racing 5Ks and I was like up there to the front, like, to me, it's not the same as the level you guys are performing at, and how everyone is equally training, where with us, it's, some guys just running a couple of times a week. Other guys are taking this real seriously, and they're putting in crazy mileage and at the gym, and their nutrition and everything is on point. So it's like the preparation is a lot different between all of us competitors, where with you guys, it's like you have to be on your A game all the time with everything. One little thing can throw everything off. So what, obviously the delay was one of them, but what were some of the other challenges that you faced while you were training during like the whole restriction of COVID and because I know you couldn't train with certain people, or I guess it was different for everybody. So what was that like for you guys?
Yeah, so we went on like a full lockdown in March. So I was training by myself for a few months. And I was like training by myself, like kind of banged up and being an idiot and not just taking a break and allowing things to heal, because I also didn't have access to like any therapy at all, like physical therapy that I was normally getting. So that injury just kind of like get worse. But I was putting in like the biggest block of training I had done, which again was dumb. And, you know, when it came time to like start to ramp up and like do some time trials, so you would stay like fresh and ready to perform for the following like season, I wasn't able to do any of that. And like, not to mention, like, not only was like that going on, but then there was like so much going on in the world with like the Black Lives Matter movement and like the whole like election and like social justice all around the world. And I feel like for the first time in my life, you know, like track wasn't at the forefront of my focus. And so I got to like do some like self-reflection and started to realize like some of the things that I didn't really like about myself as an athlete, because I was so focused on the sport and like it was affecting people I loved around me. And so that was like really emotional and really difficult for me. And I came out and like was pretty open about my experience with that. And I mean, it was amazing. And it made me face some demons that I think I was running from and hiding from for a really long time, which made me a better person. But like emotionally, it definitely took a toll for sure. And, but then, you know, things started to like get a little bit better with COVID, and then we started like training together again. And, you know, because I had that injury, I got to take a break from running, a pretty long break. It was like, I think it was like 2 months of like not really running because I was trying to let this injury heal up. And so I got to spend more time with my family and friends, which I normally don't get to do. So that was really nice too. So in a lot of ways, like COVID and like everything that was going on around the world was a really like beautiful moment, because it allowed me to like slow things down and take notice to things that I wouldn't normally take notice to, because just life moves so fast and you're just trying to like keep your head above water. So that was really big in terms of like my personal growth.
It's interesting to me to hear everyone's experience when it came to like the lockdowns and things of that nature, because for me, I live in the dumbest part of the world. I live in Florida, where our governors and our, you know, decision makers just, I don't understand a lot of the thought process that goes on. And for us, it honestly, you could tell there, you know, something was going on, but it still felt like we were operating as normal. And I mean, a lot of things were still open. They just were trusting that you would be socially distanced and you would wear a mask. But, you know, when I would go out for just training runs and things like that, I was amazed at what I was seeing. It was like, it was almost like COVID didn't exist, or like maybe people didn't have TVs or social media or any kind of method of knowing what's going on in the world. And then for us, which was nice in a way, but pretty stressful, was that we were still able, there were a lot of races still going on, not as many. And again, it's because it's more like local, small, you know, it's nothing professional. And, you know, it's not like a major New York, Chicago, London type marathon. It's just little 5Ks and ultra marathons that maybe 100 people max will go to. But, you know, for us, everything was pretty much normal. You just had to wear a mask and try to give people space. But, you know, I'm glad you touched on this about one of the challenges being social justice, Black Lives Matter, you know, with all the shootings, definitely with the election that was going on and just like the drama around that. Because something I know just from following you on social media is that, like me, you are in an interracial relationship. And, you know, I feel like when outsiders, specifically people that don't know us in any way, shape or form, they see someone like you and me they see a white person and they see us posting things that don't make sense to them because they're in their little, as somebody said, their unwoke world. And like they make these sarcastic and very disgusting comments to us, or they don't even know that. They just think we're like them, and they start saying things until we look at them like, I'm not in agreement with you on this. Like, don't assume everybody with this skin color is going to think the same way as you. And that does put a lot of stress on your training. And like you said, I mean, I've definitely gone out on runs angry, and it's like those first couple of miles, you're like, oh, like me, I'm like, oh man, I could qualify for the Olympics at this pace. And then, and then you hit like 1 or 2 miles in, you're like, oh God, I'm going to have to start walking. That was not good. But I feel like you probably had it even worse, in the sense that what we see portrayed on the news is like Black males being more of the victims than Black females. To me, I'm more concerned of when my wife wants to go out for a walk or a run, especially when she's with my son, who's almost 3 years old. To me, it's more of them getting kidnapped or sexually assaulted, things like that, to where it's one of those, okay, it's not much better, but something happens to them, there's still a chance they'd come home, where the males, they might not make it home. And I see a lot of my friends that it hits me when they say little things like, I get emotional when I hear the keys in the door and I know that's my husband walking through the door. And it didn't click for me years ago when I used to hear stuff like that, until this became more and more popular in the media, that this type of stuff happens so often, that I can only guess what that was like for you during that time in your relationship and trainings. What was that additional like stress struggle for the training and everything like that?
Yeah, well, this was gonna come later, but unfortunately, I am no longer in a relationship. But yeah, during that time, it was really, really difficult. And I at the time, I think he would agree that I felt like it brought us closer. But embarrassingly, I can also admit that before this movement, I didn't really think about a lot of the things I should have been thinking about all along. And especially like the George Floyd incident, like that just hit me so hard, because I just felt like that could have easily been a situation that the person I loved, Dennis, could have been in. And it just felt like so traumatizing to know that like that could easily be him. And I think that's sort of what woke me up and started to make me understand like his perspective and where he was coming from and how he grew up. And I just started to feel all kinds of empathy and compassion that I hadn't felt before, and that I never really like took the time to really understand, because I was more of the mindset that like, well, everyone's life is hard and you just got to like do your best and you just got to get through. But you know what? That's not really true. And some people deal with challenges that are just harder than other people. Like, unfortunately, like life isn't the same for everyone, and people are dealt different cards. And I think that it's easy to go through life being single-minded and not really think about things from other people's perspective, or try to understand like where they're coming from, how they grew up, and how they see things. And, it was that movement and everything that was happening that sort of woke me up and shook me and started to make me think like, oh, you know what? Like, it isn't the same for everybody. And it's not just about like being tough and getting through things because everyone deals with crap. No, it's more like trying to see things from other people's perspective and understand that everyone comes from a different background, and how they deal with life is different than how you deal with life, because you guys didn't grow up the same way. And so, yeah, like I spent a lot of days like crying and just feeling like I had neglected someone that I cared so much about. And we had a lot of great talks about it, and we got to a really great place. But honestly, like I thought before 2021 that 2020 was a really difficult year. But 2021 ended up being like a very, very, very difficult year, like much more difficult than 2020. There were challenges that I faced that I didn't even see coming, for sure.
That's the part I don't think a lot of people factor into this. Like when it comes to athletes, they zone in on the athletic performance. And it's just for me to see so many athletes now stepping away, even if it's just for, one game, 1 week, if they have to take a full season. But seeing like a lot of these professional athletes that are putting mental health and emotional health and their wellness first, realizing everything that comes with being a professional athlete isn't, what a lot of people make it out to be, especially now with social media and just how public your private life becomes. So, I'm assuming that is probably one of them, the relationship status and things like that, which I didn't even know about, as you could tell. Like because what I like about like someone like you and a lot of people that I follow that are athletes is you will occasionally like sprinkle in personal life to let your followers, your friends, supporters know like, hey, maybe this is what's going on, or this is something I'm doing, somebody I'm with, or whatever. But it's not like all the time. So then like something like that happens where you keep it private, and then, we don't know, like somebody doesn't know, and they just think so. That's the thing that a lot of viewers, no matter what source of media they choose, they have to realize that what we knew about a person doesn't, always translate from year to year. Things change, people change, situations change. So I'm assuming again that was being one of them. Were there other like personal, because I know you mentioned it, other personal life challenges that kind of affected you during, just training and trying to make the 2021 team?
Yeah, no, for sure. So basically how my year started was, like training was going well. I was coming out of the injury. Dennis and I were doing really well. We were in a good place. But then I had a former training partner come forward and make formal accusations against me about like bullying and harassment when we were on the team together. And this was like 3 years prior, and there had been no communication since. And it was a big shock. And there was like, I had to go through a whole formal process, like a mediation. And it was extremely stressful. It was a very unpleasant experience. But again, it was something that challenged me to look within and to like look at aspects of myself that maybe had brought that on. And obviously, like there's two sides to every story, and I'm not here to like be a victim or to villainize someone. I think that everyone has their own perspective, and there's truth to everything people feel. So, that was hard, no doubt. And it was hard to hear, negative things about yourself in a formal setting like that. But it was an experience that challenged me to, either you're going to accept your part in it, take ownership of it, and try to, do your best to ask for forgiveness in that, and hope that, the person on the other end receives that. Maybe you get something back, maybe you don't. And that's sort of like how that played out was, I did own it. I did apologize, and I didn't really actually I did get a lot back. It was received, and that's sort of all I like hope for in that scenario. But it was a whole 6-month process. And to go through that while you're like training really hard and dealing with like COVID restrictions and not knowing whether or not you're going to compete, because at the time, like we weren't even allowed out of the country. And then right after that whole scenario wrapped up, I took off to Seattle, and I like wasn't even sure I was going to be able to get out of the country. I literally like rented a car, drove across the border with a friend who was like going to come with me just as like moral support. And like, it was the scariest thing ever. It was like apocalyptic at the border. There was nobody there. We had to go through like a million different stations and like show all this paperwork to like get by. Cause I was trying to go to the Grand Prix in New York. And the only way I could do it was by like getting across before they like shut everything down, which they were, you know, supposedly going to do in a week or so. So I did get across. I was able to like compete at UW and train with those girls. Like that was super fun. And I was hanging out with some of the YSL girls, and that was great. And it was just good to be around people again and like compete. But then I realized like in the first competition, which was like a mile in UW, like how rusty I was. Like I didn't realize how like the year away from racing had like just really taken my sharpness away. But then I went to the Grand Prix and I had a pretty good performance, and that ended up being like totally worth it. But then I came home and I had to do a 2-week quarantine, which was like a nightmare. Like I was not allowed to leave my place. I had to like train outside in the freezing cold, like just on the property. So like, it was like a tiny yard. It was all fenced in, and like, it was like -2 most of the time. And I was out there like lifting weights, and it was like, I was like wearing like 7 layers and it was awful. And I was like on a stationary bike, just like pretending I'm like chasing down Lance Armstrong, trying to keep my aerobic fitness up. We had like the altitude tent set up inside and like sweating through the night. And like Dennis was there, and he was like, you know, quarantining with me, which was very stressful for him too. And then came out of quarantine, and we had like put on a couple of track meets in Victoria. And, you know, sometimes in Victoria in March, you can get some good weather. Like it can be sunny, it can be nice, but no, all 3 of those races were like the worst weather ever. It was like freezing cold, raining for some of it, and like windy. It was just a nightmare. Like literally, like there's not much else I would rather do in those moments than race. Like it was just such a bad conditions. So yeah, that was unpleasant. And it was stressful too, because, you know, you're not like, some people performed well and it was impressive, but I was not one of them. I performed very poorly in those races, and it was super hard to like see those kind of performances coming out in an Olympic year. You're just like, man, what is going on? Like, why am I performing so bad? And so like off the bat, I was just like in a mental hole. Like I was just thinking like, you know, 1 bad performance, okay, it could be a fluke. 2, maybe it's not a fluke. Like maybe there's something wrong here. So I started going in deep with like my mental performance specialist, and like we were working really hard, like trying all kinds of new stuff, like cold water immersion, breath work, breath holds, qigong, meditation, like just visualization, like just everything. Like I was going ham. And then we again took off to the States, and like this was a long stint this time. The first time I was gone about a month, and the second time it was like we didn't know, like we left and we didn't know when we'd be coming back. And that was extremely hard, like not just as like for performance reasons, but like for my relationship. It was just like, okay, well, I'm leaving and I don't know when I'll be back. And anyways, like we did the best you could. And, you know, me and my training partner, Laurence, we went to Flagstaff. In the first couple of weeks we were there by ourselves. And it was great because we were able to get our vaccine as soon as we got there, which was awesome. And by the way, I got Johnson & Johnson, and that vaccination absolutely floored me. I was at like in the middle of the night, like I had chills and like fever, and I woke up and I like could barely walk. I felt so disoriented. It was awful, but it was like a 24-hour thing, and then I was better. But that training camp went really well. And then we went down and we raced, and I had another like really bad performance at Drake. And it was like, man, like I don't think I cried as much as I cried in 2021 in my life. Like I cried so much. And at that point you got like 3 bad performances in a row, and you're just thinking to yourself like, holy crap, like this cannot be my Olympic year. Like this is not happening right now. Like last year I was like hitting the best performances of my life, and this year I'm running like crap. And so, you know, we took off to Kansas City, and it was one of those races where it was like, you know what, like if you have another bad performance, like this is going to be hard to turn around. So I just kind of like went into the race and just thought like, forget about the time, forget about the auto, like just go and race. And I actually ended up having like a decent performance there and almost got the win, but came up, I think I was like 3rd, and it was like very, very tight at the end. And so that gave me some like momentum forward. And then, you know, we went, where'd we go next? I think we went to California, and we were staying in Chula Vista, which again was like a quarantine type situation. Like we weren't really allowed to leave the property. And now we're like a month and a half into being away. And we have like all these races on the calendar. And the first one I do, I think it was like Mount Sac, and it did not go that well. And that was, again, it was like, okay, so you take a step forward and then you take a step back. And then it was like, there was one race left because I had like, I just needed to go home. Like mentally, I was like reaching a breaking point. I was crying almost every day. I was like crying to my mom, crying to my dad, crying to Dennis, crying to my coaches, like having mental breakdowns. It was awful. Like I felt like I was losing my mind. And so I do this last race, and finally like it goes well. And it's like, okay, maybe I have some momentum now. Like maybe I can make something happen. So I go home and I have to quarantine again. 2-week quarantine, can't go outside, trying to make do in like this tiny little yard, like doing work on the treadmill, doing work on the bike, lifting weights in the yard. And again, like Dennis came and did that with me, and it's like super, super stressful. But, you know, we have a great team here, and they made sure like I had everything I needed and we could make it the best possible. But, you know, coming out of that quarantine, I raced like kind of pretty quickly, and it went okay. But it, again, like conditions were crappy. It was like a very small race because of COVID, and it just didn't go as well as it needed to go. And so, but it was like okay enough that it was, you were just thinking like, okay, like I just need to hit one race. That's all I need. I just need one. And so then we had to take off to Ontario. So like literally I'm home like 2 weeks, and I'm taking off again for like a circuit in Ontario before the Olympic trials. And I have like 3 chances to like make something happen. Or I guess it was a little bit more than 3, but not very many anyway. And so I go to Ontario, and I'm thinking to myself like, okay, like this race in Victoria was like really bad conditions. The pacing was off. Like maybe if I can just make the pacing a bit better, the conditions are a bit better, then we can make something happen. And again, it's like the race scenario in Canada is like, maybe you get 3 people. That's kind of what you're looking at, 2 to 3 people, and maybe you get some pacers. And luckily we had some great pacers. But like, it's not like a full race scenario. And when you're in the States, it was like, oh, nothing's happening. Like you have like 15 people on the line, and having all those people, you just get pulled along to fast times. It's amazing. But like in a time trial scenario, it's just like a little bit harder. I'm not trying to make excuses, but like if you lose contact, all of a sudden you're out there by yourself. And so like the goal was just like stay on it as long as you can. And like, it was like, I didn't stay on it as long as I even thought like worst case scenario might be. So again, it was like another performance that went out the window and was crap. And it was right before the Olympic trials. So you're like, holy man, like now I'm looking at 2 chances. One's the Olympic trials, and then one's the last chance meet right after the Olympic trials. And that's all I have to qualify. And at this time, like Natalia had just grabbed the auto. So I was knocked out of the pool. And so I either needed to like beat Lucia head to head, like every single time, or I needed to get the auto and hope she didn't. So like the stakes were super high. And like, I'm not even lying. I literally cried every single day before the Olympic trials. And I was a nightmare to deal with. Like I was staying with my family and like, I know they were like, man, like, is it worth all this? Because like, you're a miserable person. And like, I was like calling Dennis every day, like crying to him, like, I don't know if I could do this. I just hate this. It was like a mental hell. And I was working with my mental performance guy, John Coleman, and he was really like helping me like turn things around. And I somehow got myself in a headspace for the Olympic trials that was like, all right, let's do this. And then we wake up that day and it's like, I'm not even lying. Like it was like 40-kilometer-an-hour winds. And you're just like, why does it have to be bad conditions? But it was like, whatever, we're going to go out there and we're going to do it. And of course the race was like, it wasn't really fast. It was more tactical because the conditions were so bad, but it ended up being like a good race. And, you know, I thought, okay, this is the last chance. There's one race left. If it's a perfect night, maybe I can do it. But then we couldn't really find a pacer. And like my poor teammate, you know, she raced and then she came back and paced, but she could only make it to like 800 meters. And honestly, that should have been enough for me to be able to run off of afterwards, but it just wasn't. Like, I didn't have the wheels. And so I ended up running like around the same time I'd been running the last few races, but it wasn't the auto. And after that race, like I basically had like a full blown like panic attack, like just bawling my eyes out because I knew like, okay, I didn't make the Olympics. It's over. Like 15 years of work, 15 years of chasing this dream, and it's just gone. And, you know, my mom was there and it was really hard to like see her because you're just like, man, you've given me so much to try and like make this happen. And I failed. And like your coaches are there and you know how much they gave to you and your training partners. And you just feel like not only have you disappointed yourself, but you've like disappointed everyone in your circle who've like helped you get to this point and pushed you to be here. And like, I remember I was talking to Dennis afterwards and it was like, I could just hear the disappointment in his voice. And it was so much like you're taking on your own disappointment and heartache. And then you're taking on the disappointment from everyone else. And it's not even that they're disappointed in you. It's that they're disappointed for you. But the emotion is just like unreal. And I came back from the Olympic trials and I was totally wore out. Like I didn't sleep that night. I traveled all day. I got to spend like 48 hours at home with Dennis. And I remember just saying to him, like, I think I'm going to retire. Like, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. And he was like, no, like, you're not retiring. I won't let you do it. Like, you can do this. You can make this jump. Like, we're going to at least go for Worlds next year and we're going to do things differently. Like, I'm not going to let you travel by yourself and all this other stuff. And then I took off to Flagstaff because, you know, like the World Championship window was opening up and we wanted to like make the most of the fitness because I still like believe like I was the fittest I'd ever been like this year. And so we wanted to like get that extra boost at altitude and then come down and hit like a racing circuit and see if we could get like the auto or get some good points to put myself in a good position to qualify for Worlds. So we hit that first like race and it was just like an 800 tune up for the following race, which was going to be a 1500. And that went well. It was okay. And then I went up to like Desert Hot Springs because everywhere else in California was too expensive to stay. And Desert Hot Springs is like, there's nothing there. It's just a desert. Like, it was scary. I was there like, I'm not going to survive this. Like, I'm going to get abducted. And I was waking up at like 4 a.m. sneaking onto like a track, and like literally the sun wasn't even up. I was training in the dark, and there was like wild dogs coming into the track, and they were just like, what the frick is happening? Like, where are these dogs coming from? Like, are they going to eat me? It was so scary. And it was like a couple days before I was supposed to leave to go and race the 1500 at one of the Sound Running meets. And like Dennis calls me, and he just tells me like, it's over, you know, like the relationship's done. And I was just immediately like, my whole world came crashing down on me. It was like 10 years being with someone I thought I was going to be with for the rest of my life. And it was just done. And it felt like a nightmare. Like I literally, I couldn't do anything for like 48 hours. I just stayed in my Airbnb by myself and was like hysterical, was just crying, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. And I couldn't understand how this happened. I didn't understand like where it even came from. Like, it seemed like it came out of nowhere. And I ended up pulling out of the race because it's like, frick, like what's the point? I can't even hold myself together.
Right.
And I immediately like got a flight home. My mom flew out, and she like came, because you know Dennis and I are living together in Victoria. She came, helped me like pack up all his things because he was on vacation when he did this. And yeah, like it was like literally in the span of 2 weeks, I didn't accomplish a dream I had had my entire life and worked toward for 15 years. And then a relationship I had been in for 10 years just like ended. And it happened in like the span of 20 minutes. It was so difficult. And then like, you know, not to mention like COVID, and then like 2 former teammates coming after me and all of the restrictions and everything. It was just like, God, it was such a hard year. But, you know, I look back on it now and I just think, you know, maybe all of that happened for a reason. And honestly, like it's still kind of fresh. Like, it's only been like 2.5 months since the breakup, and I guess almost 3 months since I didn't make the team. So, you know, maybe there's still a lot more processing I need to do. But I don't know, like when your whole life blows up and you kind of hit rock bottom, you start to realize all of the things you were neglecting and you weren't doing, and how much you were holding back from being your full self. And you start to ask yourself, like, why was that happening? And how was that happening? And, you know, I think that what happened between Dennis and I was really sad, but I'm not ignorant in the fact that I know that the life that we were living was very difficult, and that it was all about like running and performance, and that was really hard for him. And I'm not sitting here saying like I was the perfect girlfriend. I wasn't. Like, I made many mistakes. He made many mistakes. And I think that the pursuit of the Olympics became bigger than the relationship we had together. And unfortunately, in the end, the love wasn't enough. And that's really sad. But I wish him the best, and I hope that he does well in his life and he finds success and happiness. And I'm sad that things didn't work out, but that's just how life goes sometimes. Just like I'm sad that I didn't make the Olympics. Like, it was really hard. And it's the first Olympics I didn't watch because I couldn't stomach it. But, now that sort of the dust has settled a little bit and the emotions are not so strong, I still love running. I'm working, 2 great jobs that I really love. Doing like fitness classes, and I'm working at a running store, and I still want to run. which is like, I didn't think that if my whole life blew up that I would still want to run and like pursue maybe making the world team. And for the first time in my life, it's like, I'm just taking one day at a time. And I'm not thinking about way down the road and focusing on goals and ignoring everything else. I'm just literally every day, I'm trying to do the best I can that day. And I don't think I was doing that before. And I think it took away from so much in my life. And that's why so many sort of like what you would describe as bad things happened in 2021. So that's the gist of it.
I'll tell you, it's like listening to that. It's like those, maybe I guess you could say like, it's like a video that you see of like somebody doing artwork and they keep doing stuff to, like you see it and you're like, okay, that's enough. And then they do something else and you're like, wow, okay, I thought that was it. And then they do something else to it. And you're like, every time I think that's it, something else happens. And it's like when it rains, it pours. And you're like, okay, what next? And you think, okay, it can't get worse than this. And then something else happens. You're like, okay, it can't get worse than that. And then it just keeps piling on. And like, you know, I've been in some relationships like that. And even personally, you know, recently my addiction to alcohol was driving me to the point where I was about to lose my family. And it's that, wow. You know, that thought, and I've been in a situation where somebody that I was engaged to decided to walk away. You know, I know what that's like. It's crippling. It's like you can't function. Like you want to, but you can't. Your mind is like in a whole nother place. Physically, you just can't find the ability to get, like, you even there's things that would normally motivate you to get up or make you laugh. It's just like nothing makes sense. And
yeah,
and
exactly,
you know, it's tough. And to have all that happen, like you said, like it feels like when you look at a lifetime, it feels like 20 minutes, like, because it's just so, everything happens so quickly that, you know, a couple months feels like, you know, a half an hour compared to a lifetime. And even something else you touched on, that, you know, how it affects, you know, family, friends, loved ones, because I don't know if it's a Gemini thing, if it's a personality thing, but when I make connections with somebody, I tend to consider them a friend more than they might consider me a friend. Because I just tend to be a very personal person, and I like every one of you guys that I've interviewed that actually communicate with me more than just okay, here's my contact information. All right, here's the answers to your question. Bye. And you might tag me. You know, like a lot of the athletes, they come and go so quickly, but there's a decent amount of you like you that still stay in touch, and you joke around. Sometimes you even, you know, like or comment on something I post, which to me is like really cool, because I'm like, here's somebody who's like, you know, maybe not in their eyes, but in my opinion is very popular and has a lot of followers and activity on their posts, that for them to have the time to even come across something that I wrote or post and acknowledge it is cool. But then when it comes to like the trials, the actual Olympics, like major events, like I know each event to a professional athlete is important. But there's obviously going to be certain ones that are put on a higher pedestal. And I think those events are the toughest for me as a fan, because I've come to root for, support, encourage, do everything I can for a lot of you guys. And when you guys are competing against each other and Olympic spots are online or whatever it may be, that is tough, because I'm like, who do I like I'm happy for the ones that succeed, but then I'm like, I feel terrible for the ones that didn't, especially like during the trials, when you can see the emotions of someone who's ecstatic and so happy that they made it, and then there's someone who you could tell they're just crushed and they're trying to stay, at least for the until they get into the back where no one can see them. They're trying to at least save face and just stay calm about it. It's tough. And you know, I don't think a lot of people will, like, until you said it, I didn't even think about it, how a lot of athletes probably can't even watch the Olympics because it's still even, I mean, it might be a little bit tougher this time around because of how close it was, but you know, normally you have a little bit of time between that selection process, or at least from what I understand, to where by then it kind of settles down and you're like, okay, I can stomach to watch this, or, you know, I'll support so-and-so. But yeah, like, you train your whole life for something, you don't get it. And now it's like, how do you stomach and tolerate watching that, seeing somebody else live out what you wanted to do? Yeah, I can't imagine. So I really, this was like out of left field, because I know we discussed, like, we kind of went over some things, and I'm like, I feel like when you first said what happened, I'm like, oh God, like I might have to edit this out. Like, I didn't know this was gonna happen. But you know, I think you were very open about it, and I think that's what people need to hear. Like, I was just sitting here listening, like, wow, like I you know, I follow her on social media and see her post all the time. I had no idea any of this stuff was going on. It's one of those things that makes you gain respect for a person even more, because again, you have no idea what somebody's going through, and you know, you just say, oh, they couldn't cut it, or you know, whatever, you know, not in a, you don't mean it to be negative or insulting, but you just look at it and you're like, okay, maybe this isn't for them. But you don't realize, maybe if all these things that we don't know is going on in the background don't happen, the results are totally different, and we're looking at a whole different scenario and experience. But I like what you mentioned about it hasn't, like, you got over the thoughts, and I think we all have it, like when we have bad races. You know, recently for those that don't listen or don't follow along, a lot of people know that right now I'm in this 100-mile race,
right?
Addiction, I guess you would call it.
Good, like, addiction.
I keep signing up for these races when I could sign up for something shorter, a little bit easier. But you know, I kind of took it for granted, because the first 9, I'll never say they were easy, but I was able to get through all the different hurdles that you go through physically and mentally and emotionally. And then, you know, between not being able to train as much, because I decided at the worst time, you know, I got 3 100-milers within like a 3-month period, and I decided to start
crazy.
My arms sleeved, which means I you know what I mean? Like, the plan was to, like, just go crazy. Like, I was supposed to get all of this done. Like, I was going to put in crazy hours. They were going to use crazy numbing cream on me so that we could just knock it all out in like a couple weeks, so that I wouldn't have to miss training and all that stuff. And it just didn't work out. Like, so, like, my training has been crap. I've gained a lot of weight just from not being able to train, and at least, like, if I couldn't train, like, normally I would heat train by taking baths or go for walks where I could at least, like, wear sweats and do stuff like that. But you can't sweat. You got to keep it clean and sanitized. So, you know, I've had 2 consecutive races where things were going so great, and then I get to like the 50-mile mark and it just falls apart. And I'm going into this last race of the year, and you know, there was parts of me, you know, and that's the nice thing about ultras, is you end up in the second half of like an ultra, there's a lot more walk breaks, and you start connecting with the other runners out there. A lot of them you might know, and I was telling each and every one of them, hoping somebody would be on my side and just agree with me and convince me that it was okay. But I kept telling them, I'm like, yeah, this is my last one. Like I'm going back to 50 milers, or I'm going back to marathons and 5Ks. Like, this is just stupid. I've already, and every single one of them, they're like, in the nicest way possible, just basically shut up. Like, I don't want to hear that. You say that now, but in a couple of weeks, everything, the hard love and the truth. And I'm going into this last race, which is actually even more insane, because it's technically it's 100-miler, but I'm also signed up for the additional 25. So it's like,
of course you are.
Exactly. So like, my main goal is to get this DNF like failure mentality monkey off my back. My main goal at this point is to at least just get to the 100 and finish that. And then whatever happens with the 25 happens. But, it's that same mentality where it's like, okay, at what point do you say, like, I'm chasing something that doesn't make sense, or it's maybe, taking away from personal life and things like that? Because I have to consider a wife, a kid, personal life, work life, so many different things that, professional athletes like you have to as well. You have 2 jobs. I can barely deal with one. So knowing that, what's your thought process on possibly trying for 2024?
Well, first of all, like, I feel like I can relate so much to what you just talked about in your pursuit of all these 100-mile races. And I think what's beautiful about what you said was, when you were talking about like quitting, you had all these people kind of just telling you like, no, you're not going to do that, like giving you like tough love. And I think, a beautiful part about life is, even when you're in a really dark place in your own life, if you take a look around, there is always light in that dark room. And, when I was like literally in the darkest room I've ever been in, probably in my entire life, I was surrounded by so much love. And I think like, I've always been surrounded by love. I've not lived a life where I haven't been loved, but I think you take it for granted when things are going well. And then all of a sudden, when things aren't going well, it's like you start to notice it so much more. And I am just so grateful for all of the people who like really showed up for me when I was struggling, because it made such a difference. And it's why I wanted to come on and be open about what I was going through, because I think the scariest part about my experience was feeling like I was alone. And so, if sharing my story, and I appreciate so much that you shared yours as well, helps someone else who's like in a similar scenario know that like, listen, it's dark right now, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you just have to like get up and try your best every day. Even if that means like doing something really small, like so today I'm going to get up, I'm going to make my bed. Like that seems like nothing, but you know what? It's really hard when you feel like you can't get out of bed. Mm-hmm. So, like the little things matter, and the people who are around you, who love you and show up for you, they matter. And I think like life is so fast, and you can get caught up chasing these like big goals and these material things, and you can forget about what's right in front of you. And I think like the last 6 years of my life, and maybe even my whole life, I've been just hyper focused on making the Olympics, and so many other things have taken a back seat and gone on the back burner. And I think balance is so important. And like what you're talking about now, like, how do you know like when you're done or when enough is enough? And honestly, like, I don't know that I can answer that. What I can say is that the fire's still burning really strong. And to me, like, that's an indicator that I'm not done. But what I do know is that I can't continue this pursuit the way I have in the past. I can't be single-minded. I can't be singular focused. I want to live a full life. And, something that really hit home for me during everyone's Olympic trials was what Shannon Osika shared in her Instagram. And it was like, she was very close to making the team, and she shared a post that was like, thank you for all the love and support, but I want everyone to know, like, I'm not disappointed in my performance. Like, I showed up, I did the best I could. And like, although the Olympics are a beautiful thing, they're not everything. And I don't do this for that. And that just really hit me, because it was like, wow, like, this is a woman who is running 4 flat and like is the best in the world, missed out on the team, and has this perspective. And I just thought, like, that's amazing. And it started to make me realize, like, yeah, like, the world decided that the Olympics was like the pinnacle of sport and something everyone should pursue. But that's just, excuse my language, that's bullshit. Like, it's bullshit. What's really important is the journey. And I don't think I ever believed that until now, but the journey has taught me so much more than, showing up at the Olympics. And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if I went to the Olympics, I would be sitting there saying, like, yeah, Olympics are the best thing ever. And I have a ring tattoo on my body somewhere. Right. And I'd be like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, there goes the goddess of sports, whatever. But I don't know. I think no matter what happens, I'm going to look back on this and I'm going to remember the challenges, the beautiful moments, the successes, the crying, the celebrating, all the people I met, all the things I shared with everyone that I met. And those are going to be the most valuable things to me. Like the medals and the records and all the other things, they're just going to be things. They're not going to hit as close to my heart as the other stuff. Even the stuff that hurt, it's always beautiful in some way.
That's very true. Because I've mentioned it before, I'm turning for a second to look again at the medals and awards I got. And I'm like, you forget about them. Like as special as they are in the moment and the journey to get there and everything that it took to accomplish what you did. I even at one point, it's covered now because of the sleeve. I had to, it kind of hurt to make the decision, but I had to cover up one of my tattoos that was from one of my biggest accomplishments when I used to wrestle back in high school. And it was one of those things, like I literally had it tattooed permanently on my body. And for so many years, I forgot that even existed, that I had accomplished that. And the emotions behind it, it's crazy that, we put, whether it's us allowing it to happen or us just doing it to ourselves, we put so much pressure on ourselves in so many aspects. And just like, again, with the relationships, that negative that happens from one of them ending, we always think that pain that we're in at that moment is going to last forever. And even if we know it won't, it hurts so bad that you psych yourself out of knowing the truth of that. And then time goes by and you heal and you recover. And like you said, you look back on it and there's there's a light in each one of those dark moments. And I love that you said that, because there's this past race where I was just beating myself up mentally and physically could have finished and would have finished, but I just mentally, I didn't want to. Instead of just being a poor sport about it and like you said, making it all about me, I noticed the people that were out there so close to accomplishing the goal, some of them that had never done one before. And I said, you know what, I'm done, but I'm not leaving. I'm going to stick around and I'm going to cheer these guys on. I'm going to help them if I can and just do what I can for them and watch them in that moment, because it, like you said, reignites that fire. And it's like, as I started to get upset at myself the more I sat there, because watching them go through what they were going through, a lot of them in way worse physical pain and situations than me. And I'm like, okay, I could have pushed through this. It was more mental than physical, but it was just, it's one of those decisions you also got to make for your mental health. And it's the balance of life, personal life and sports. And, to not end this on such a somber mood. One thing that, I found funny, and I almost made the joke earlier, but it was a very, very serious time of the discussion. So I didn't want to like throw that out there. I'm starting to learn when to be stupid and make sarcastic comments. I'm trying to get better at that.
I need to take notes from you then, because I'm not good at it.
Yeah, I'm bad. Like when somebody's like going through a tough time, like I start like sending them stupid things because I'm like, I know it's gonna make them smile or make them laugh, but sometimes I'm like, all right, that one flopped and now I feel really bad. So I'm like, so I the joke was coming because you were talking about how, you know, the accusations were coming about, you know, bullying or just like negative experiences with you. And recently, nobody else knows this other than you and I that I know of, because I didn't tell anybody else about this. But one day I'm, you know, for you guys listening, I'm on Instagram and I get a notification basically that somebody added me. And I'm looking at the profile picture and the name and I'm like, okay, that's, you know, maybe she accidentally deleted me and re-added me, or I'm like, maybe she never was following me. I thought she was, I'm not sure. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna add her back. Like, I mean, I'm following her anyways, but let me just make sure. And I click on the profile and it's not Mariah. It's someone pretending to be Mariah. And so I look at the first 3 pictures and I'm like, okay, those are her pictures. I recognize them from her page. And I was like, oh, let me go look at the bio. And that's when I realized some random person decided to make I don't know what the exact term is, but they made a fake account of like pretending to be her, but they were promoting some random OnlyFans like page.
Yeah. Exactly.
So like when you're telling the story, I'm starting to think of like, I wonder if this was like one of them like trying to blackmail you or get you like put a black eye on your reputation by making this like fake account and starting to make people think you had an OnlyFans account. Like it's just like, it was one of the weirdest things that I've seen, because I hear about people that make like actually a couple of the athletes I know have had somebody make a fake profile of them just pretending to be them, which I don't understand, because like, what's the point unless somebody's giving you information that you're trying to steal? But like, what if you have an OnlyFans page that someone's gonna click on and see that you're not the person you're pretending to be? What's like, I don't get it. Why not just send all your followers? They should have just went through your followers list and just added us and been like, hey, here's my OnlyFans page. Like, why try to be you?
I know. I don't understand. Like, honestly, I think you were like the first person to send me the account. And I was like, what the frick? And then it was like, I started getting a million messages about this account and like how they've been like adding all my friends and like they have all my pictures up. And I was just like, come on, man. Like,
2021.
What is happening? Yeah. Like, what is going on? And then like the photos they had up, I was like, what is this?
I know, it's like, it's crazy.
I know. I don't get it. I don't even know who it was. Who knows? Mystery of life. But I was pissed, but I was super grateful, you know, that people told me, because it was like, yeah, like I got this person out there making an account and, you know, pretending to be me. And like, I got an OnlyFans account. Like, what? What is going on?
I was like, well,
like,
I don't know.
I better be getting some money from this. Like, what do you need, my bank account? Where is it at?
I'm like, well, I guess the sponsors weren't putting up enough, and you have to find a way to afford to make it to these races somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, like it was just like, man, what the frick? It's just crazy. And I never even checked. Like, I don't know how. I don't really know how OnlyFans work, so I didn't go on. And who knows? Maybe I have a profile on there.
Well, I've never clicked on it, but I actually know one person that has their own page, and sometimes they'll put like stuff on Snapchat, kind of like advertising, like, hey, check this, you know, you can see more at my OnlyFans. So from what I understand, like it's like there's like some free content, and then like the extra good, or like you would say the juicy stuff is gonna be paid for, and then you get like certain access. So that was the point I was making. Like, if someone is advertising themselves as you, but then let's say we do actually click on the link, it's not going to be you unless they have like weird videos of you on the track, and that's what they're trying to sell is like
oh. And then like, who's paying for that?
Right. Because it's like, unless there's some pervert that's like, oh, can you record these track athletes in their outfits like when they're on a track, because I can see so much of their body, like, but it's like you can see that on YouTube, so what's the like.
Yeah, I don't know, man, but yeah, that was crazy. I was not impressed, but you know what, Instagram acted pretty fast. That got taken down pretty quick, but then it like surfaced again, didn't it?
Yeah, there was because I remember going to double check because you asked me to check something, and I was like, oh, the page is gone. And then like, I don't know if it was the same day or the next day, but it was definitely within 24 hours that like the page was back. And I'm like, so I sent it to you again. And then at that point, I haven't seen it since. I forgot all about it actually until we had this discussion, but yeah, it's
well, hopefully it's gone for good, because you know what, like I can't do it.
So for anyone that since we're talking about social media, and again, as I always do, I'll put the information in the show notes, but for anyone who's listening and wants to maybe check out real quick while they're listening, where can they find you on social media that you're willing to share? Because I know some we like to keep private with just certain groups of people, but anything you're willing to share with new potential followers, you're free to promote yourself here as well.
Yeah, so I honestly just have Instagram. It's at Mariah_Kelly1. I'm on Facebook, but I really don't. I'm not actively doing anything there. And my Twitter game is at 0. And like, I don't do the whole Snapchat thing. So yeah, Instagram it is. That's where you can find me.
I actually made the joke last night with my wife. I realized now, granted, like I would say 90% of my tweets are literally me replying to people that are looking for like podcast recommendations. So I'm always like promoting, whether it's the entire show or like someone that's like, hey, I'm looking for a podcast that talks about this or this topic. So I'll send them like individual ones if I have them that relate. So I'm on Twitter a lot, and plus like just sports in general. I'm always commenting on things that whatever sport event is going on that's trending. I'm communicating with people out there. But I realized now I had different accounts in the past, but this current one that I have now that's strictly just for the website and all running things basically. Since May 2017, I've tweeted over 33,000 times.
What?
I don't even know how. I told my wife I'm worse than Donald Trump. Like, this is embarrassing.
I don't know. That's hard to beat.
Like I was like, there's no way I've tweeted that many times in just over 4 years. Like,
wow, that's crazy.
I mean, granted, I spent a lot of time, like I said, on there because, like, to me, I say it on other episodes, yeah, that like I feel like that's the most engaging. I feel like Facebook now is just people just post and they walk away. Like they don't even really, they just post stuff for their personal friends and family to see. And they might check that once in a while. It's kind of becoming the old people's thing.
I was just gonna say that.
To where Instagram is like, you post your pictures and you browse other people's pictures. Like you find like the inspirational stuff. It's almost like a Pinterest or one of those type of things. To where Twitter is the work environment, like the break room where we're all like gossiping and
That's true.
So to me, like Twitter's become more fun because like it's the most engaging. Like there's so much going on, to where the other ones it's like not much happening. To where, you know, I don't know.
I know what you mean.
Social media is definitely a trendy thing as well. So I still wish they'd bring back MySpace, to be honest, but that's
right. MySpace was the thing.
Because I just keep looking at all these things and like everyone jokes around about it. Like we had it made back then and we just didn't realize it, like how perfect MySpace was. And they like any change they made, we seemed to love like where anything they change now on these apps, like we're all pissed off and like put it back. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So whatever Tom was doing back in those days, man, that guy was a genius.
You know, you can still find your MySpace account. Mine is not flattering.
Well, I apparently deleted mine because I can't find it, and I know what the name was because back then I used the same name for everything, kind of like I do now. So it's kind of disappointing because I was even trying to remember. I know the exact email address and everything. I just can't find. So I guess I must have deleted it somehow, but
that's surprising because I found mine the other day and my profile picture was of me hitting like a huge beer bong. I was like, what is happening?
Oh man,
bad kid.
Well,
I think I was in high school.
Well, I appreciate the time because also for you guys that don't know, and I just found out as we were getting ready to start this, she just finished training and everything. So, I mean, the nice thing, I guess, for you is, let's see, it is, because I know you're 3 hours behind. So it's still like afternoon for you. With me, it's almost dark here and it's starting the time to wind down. But I appreciate not only all the time you took today, but just how open you were, something I didn't even know we were going to go that deep. But I appreciate it. And I'm sure someone listening, I feel like everyone listening is going to get something out of it, but there's going to be someone going through something that you talked about, the accusations, the relationships, the letdowns, personal things interfering with, your goals and dreams. And yeah, like there's a lot that went into this. So I really appreciate you taking that time and being so open.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and yeah, like you've always been really fun to talk with, and I don't really seem to hold back too much when you ask me questions. So it's been a lot of fun, and I seriously enjoy the amount of openness you give back too. I think the most beautiful part of life is, being open with each other and ourselves and sharing our true experiences in hopes that by being vulnerable, we give permission to others to feel safe to do that too.
Awesome. Well, until the next episode, guys, pray for me because 125 miles around Miami is it's going to be an interesting 40 hours this weekend.
Yeah,
I'm
going to check up on you.
Yeah. So you guys, make, as we've said here, try to appreciate the small things in life, take advantage of the time you have and the people you have in your life, and just make the best of it. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Mile You're In podcast. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check out previous episodes and more at heelstriker954.com.